And welcome back to another episode of TED Talk Stamps. Before I get into today's topic, I want to let you know about my new blog/newsletter that I've started on Substack. Some of you may already know that I had started a blog on WordPress, and I had even gotten a few articles posted. But for various reasons, I just couldn't get into that platform. And I just found it hard to motivate myself to post more. Then I discovered Substack. And although it doesn't have the most sophisticated layout and control capabilities, I found it a lot more easier and straightforward to use, and I'm getting stuff posted. So I'm posting once a week. And while the main attraction of Substack for most writers, and that's who the main audience of, or the main customer focus for Substack is, writers, novelists, journalists and such. The main attraction is that they can monetize their Substack publications with subscriptions, paid subscriptions. Although a lot of them do have a free subscription tier, which is limited. You get only an occasional free post. Well, I just want to let you know that I'm not going that route. All of my posts will be free. My whole channel will be a free subscription. There is, of course, a Substack app for mobile devices, but it can also easily be accessed through a browser, either on your phone, laptop, or desktop. I've put a link to my Substack in the description below, or you can just go to the home page and type in the search box TED Talk Stamps, and you'll find me. You will also be able to see who else that I subscribe to, and that includes other philatelic Substack writers like Wayne Youngblood, so be sure and check it out. So with this episode, I am starting a new series called Stamp Collecting Basics. The series is meant to help beginners climb on board the philatelic train, or if you are a more advanced collector already, to act as a sort of refresher course on basic concepts of philately. I was considering the name, stamp collecting from square one, but I'm not necessarily, in fact I'm not, period, starting at square one. And the episodes won't be in any particular order that you have to follow in order to take you from beginner to expert. Along with that, I've created a new playlist, which you can find by clicking on my profile picture down below, going to my channel's homepage, clicking on the playlist tab, and then you will see all the Stamp Collecting Basics videos conveniently in one spot that you can access. In this video, I'm going to give a very basic overview of the various printing methods used for the production of stamps and how to recognize them. And these are engraving, letterpress, which people usually actually call typography, but that's an obsolete term, although typography was the term used back when letterpress was being used in the early days of stamps. Then there's lithography and photogravure. There are, of course, other printing methods that have been used over the years, such as silk screening, hot foil stamping, embossing, thermographic ink, but they're not commonplace, and they're more specialized methods that go beyond what I want to cover here. And even for those four basic printing methods, I'm only going to cover the most basic concepts, because over the years they have evolved from photo to chemical to electrical processes, digital even. So that would be just, overwhelming, just too much to cover in one episode. But what I'm going to give you are the basic concepts that will help you identify those particular printing methods on the stamps and help you know what you're looking at. Now, to illustrate these four printing methods, I have 4 stamps of Austria. They are all of the same design, but each of them was printed in one of these 4 different ways. And this is the 1 shilling Maria Cel Basilica stamp from the 1957 series that ran through 1965, depicting various churches, buildings, and whatnot in Austria. However, that doesn't stop dealers from misidentifying the different stamps in their sales listings. So let's look at them individually. I'll start with letterpress. This is the simplest method of printing. Letterpress is similar to the everyday rubber hand stamp that you're familiar with in your home or your workplace. A die is first engraved into a steel or copper plate. Sometimes the blank space of the design that were not meant to be inked would be carved or etched away, leaving only the raised portions that'll receive ink and be pressed onto the stamp sheet. Another way, however, which was more commonly used later, was similar to making an engraved stamp. You start off with a master die that has been engraved with the design of the stamp. And then a transfer die would be created from the master die, which would then be used to press all of the stamp images onto the printing plate. However, in letterpress, an intermediate transfer die had to be created first, from which the actual transfer die for the printing plate would be made. That's because the first transfer will give you a die in relief, and then using that to create the printing plate will give you a printing plate with recessed images. So you have to first make a intermediate transfer die, and that first die is then used to create the working transfer die, which will be recessed, and then when you create each cliché on the printing plate, you will have the stamp images in relief. Now, letterpress stamps usually look cruder, similar to the way a woodcut looks compared to a metal engraving. You can't get the real fine line details because the ink will just be squeezed away from the surface of the die during printing. And also any fine lines on a relief plate would just quickly be worn away anyways during the printing process. So as you see on this stamp of Liechtenstein, letterpress stamps usually have larger areas, like the lettering is larger, and the lines making up the engraving of the image are a lot coarser. And as you can see on this comparison of the engraved Austrian stamp compared to the letterpress Austrian stamp, the letterpress also looks much cruder than the finer lines of the engraved stamp. So then let's look at the engraved stamp. Engraved stamps, the image on the plate is recessed. And for engraved stamps, a master die is engraved with a reverse image of the final stamp. That master die is then pressed onto another steel roll to create a transfer die, which now has a normal facing image, but in relief. This transfer die is then pressed into the printing plate 50 times, 100 times, or however large the printed sheet will be. The ink is then spread over the entire plate, and then a doctor blade wipes the surface of the plate, leaving ink only in the recessed design areas. The paper is pressed onto the plate under very high pressure, and the paper is forced into the lines where it picks up the ink. And then when the ink is dried, you can feel distinct raised lines on the design when you rub a fingernail over the stamp. Very fine lines and details can be engraved into these stamps, resulting in stamps of just renowned beauty. The third method I'm going to mention is photogravure. It's similar to line engraving just in the sense that they are both recessed printing process, or another term for recessed is intaglio. But the printing plates are created differently and they yield quite different results. Bavaria was the pioneer in the use of photogravure for printing their stamps. In gravure printing, the stamp design is photographed through a very fine screen, which creates, in effect, as an analogy, a digitized version of the image, similar to pixels on a computer screen. A chemical process etches a pit into the plate where each of these pixels occur. And as in engraved printing, the entire plate is inked and then wiped clean, leaving ink only inside the pits that form the image. The pits can be made of various depths or diameters to create lighter or darker areas on the final printed stamp. However, unlike with engraved stamps, the printing plate uses much lower pressure. The ink is readily absorbed into the paper and the result is a flat image with no discernible difference in height between the inked and the uninked areas. Here is what Bavaria's first gravure stamps looked like. You can easily see the dots making up the image. And one of the easy tells of a gravure printed stamp is to look at the edges, the borders of a stamp design, and you will always see the curved little beads along the edge. Now, one of the advantages of gravure printing was that stamp images could be printed with a full range of gradation from solid color to light shading, which you can see if I zoom out a little on the Bavaria stamp so you're not, missing the forest for the trees. And going back to our Austria stamps, here's a comparison of the engraved stamp next to the gravure stamp. And like I mentioned with the Bavaria, look along the edges and you can easily see the round pits along the borders of the design. In modern gravure printing, you get multicolored designs by first separating the design into at least 4 color layers: cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. And a different gravure plate is created for each of those colors, with paper going through each printing press, printing plate in turn. Here is a US stamp printed by gravure. You can see how many more colors have been produced on the final stamp. This picture of the plate block shows you that 6 plates were used with 6 different colored inks. And in this close-up of the stamp, you can see how they create lighter and darker shades of blue by varying the size of the pits. Now, the last method I'm going to talk about is lithography. Lithographic printing involves creating a plate where the design areas that do not receive ink are kept wet in order to repel the oil-based printing ink, which clings then to the dry parts of the plate. You can see where the lithographic process allows for the printing of large, solid-colored areas, showing no cross-hatching or dots as with the other processes. However, in order to create gradations in the colored areas from dark to light, the image on the printing plate has to undergo a screening process, which again gives us telltale dots in the final image, similar to the gravure image. Lithography is an offset printing method, whereas the other methods, the printing plate contacts the paper directly, thus the term direct printing. Lithography is called indirect printing. That is, the printing plate actually first prints the image onto a rubber blanket on an offset roller, which then is used to transfer the image to the paper. So you will also hear lithography called offset lithography. The use of a rubber offset roller also helps preserve the life of a printing plate. And here are the Austria stamps side by side with the engraved. Now, the first US stamps to be entirely produced with lithography. I say entirely because previously there was a combination of lithography and engraving. But the 1992 Wildflower set was entirely produced using lithography. You'll notice the dark background is a solid uniform color. But in the purple petal especially, you can see where screening was utilized to create dark to light shading. Now, while the edges of lithograph designs can be clean and sharp, as you can see on the left and right edges, they can also tend to be rough, as seen along the top edge, because as with letterpress printing, when you press the plate against the paper, the ink is, forced out and, seeps out beyond the edge of the design, creating these rough edges. These days, of course, engraved stamps are a dying art, and almost all U.S. and worldwide stamps are being produced by offset lithography because it is a much quicker and cheaper method of producing stamps. They're also incredibly easy to counterfeit, but I'm not going there today. To review then, let's go back to our original 4 stamps of Austria. And in this slide, I've stacked them one atop the other so you can make a good side-by-side comparison. And with this image, I can also show you another way to tell what kind of printing you are looking at on a stamp. On the top is the engraved stamp. You notice there are 2 names inscribed in the bottom margin. The second stamp also has the same 2 names inscribed. In the vast majority of engraved stamps, the stamp designer's name appears on the left side, while the engraver's name appears on the right side. Most notably on American stamps, though, you don't see either name. Now, since both engraved stamps and letterpress printed stamps start with engraved dies, they will each bear the name of an engraver. However, as I mentioned before, you can easily tell the difference in the stamps by just lightly rubbing a fingernail over the surface of the stamp, and you'll feel the ridges of the raised ink on an engraved stamp. For lithography and gravure printed stamps, there are no engraved master dies, so there is no engraver name on the final stamp. The image is created by photographic, chemical, or other means, so the only name that appears is that of the stamp artist. So I hope you found this overview of the basic printing methods useful. If you have any other questions about anything covered here, be sure and leave them in the comments below. Or better yet, hop on over to TED Talk Stamps, the forum, and start a discussion on it. Also, let me know what other basic concepts you'd like me to cover in future videos, and I will try my best to oblige. Until then, this is Ted the Talking Stamp Collector wishing you all once again happy stamping.